You ever wake up thinking it's just going to be a normal day, only to find out someone declared war on your life while you were sleeping at 5 a.m.? I opened my eyes to a sound that didn't belong: deep, industrial, mechanical bulldozers, cement mixers, excavators, lining up like an army outside my window. I ran out barefoot, heart pounding, still half in a dream. And that's when I saw it, a full-scale construction operation setting up camp on my land. 50 yards from my cabin, a foundation already being dug like my property line was just a rumor. And right then, right there, standing like a queen, in the middle of it all was a woman in a sleek black suit, flanked by 2 private security guards. Melinda Blackwood, the self-proclaimed protector of Pinewood Estates. But the only thing she was protecting was her illusion of control. "Your cabin violates 3 emergency safety ordinances," she said, like she was handing me a parking ticket, not an eviction from my own life. "You've got 72 hours to leave the premises or face legal action." That moment, that was the last time I ever saw my property the same way. Because they didn't just build a warehouse on my land, they tried to erase everything I'd ever built with my own hands, and they picked the wrong man to erase. Let me take you back. Before the war began, before the paperwork, the lawyers, the cameras, the secrets. Back to when this place was just mine. I'm Daniel Cross, I'm 42 years old, and I'm a land surveyor. Which means I know more about property law than most attorneys you've ever met. This land, it wasn't just a plot on a map, it was legacy. Inherited from my grandfather in 1987, 40 untouched acres outside Reno, my sanctuary. And my cabin, I built it up from old bones with my own hands: plumbing, workshop, heating, wood stove, wildlife trails. I lived here for peace, not politics. But 5 years ago, that peace started to rot. The first signs came slow: fresh McMansions creeping up the valley, followed by pristine sidewalks and Californians with golf carts. Then came the HOA. The Blackwood family had run it since the 70s, like a monarchy. Melinda Blackwood was its current queen, a blonde-haired tyrant with a perfect bob and a law degree's worth of intimidation tactics. But I never paid attention because I didn't live in her kingdom. Big mistake. That morning, as her black Escalade rolled up like it was the opening scene of a mob movie, she handed me a glossy folder filled with legal jargon, fake engineering assessments, codes I'd never heard of, and a claim that my cabin threatened the community water supply. I knew instantly the documents were a lie. Because the man who supposedly signed the engineering report, he died 3 years ago. I went to his funeral. They'd forged a dead man's signature to steal my land, and that wasn't just fraud, that was war. I asked for proof. She smirked. "It's confidential. Pending review." And just like that, she thought I'd pack up and disappear like everyone else probably had. But I wasn't everyone else. She didn't know who she was dealing with. I knew the law. I knew land, and now I had nothing left to lose. First thing I did, I documented everything. High-resolution photographs, GPS coordinates, time-stamped videos. I marked every inch of my property with professional-grade precision. But the moment I stepped outside to gather evidence, her guards started shadowing me like I was a criminal trespassing on my own soil. Still, I didn't stop. Next step, the county office. Simple enough: pull my records, prove I own the land, case closed. Only the county's computer system was down. Not once, not twice, for days in a row. And each time I showed up, the clerk gave me the same nervous smile, like she was afraid to even look me in the eye. It didn't take long to realize someone had buried the truth, and someone had helped. Police didn't want to get involved. Told me it was a civil dispute. The system, the one I believed in, wasn't broken, it was bought. But then, a miracle. Jonna, a county records clerk with shaky hands and a conscience that wouldn't let her sleep. She agreed to meet after hours, and what she showed me, it made my blood boil. Forged documents, falsified signatures, boundary line changes made in secret. And at the center of it all, Melinda Blackwood. She wasn't just building a warehouse. She was orchestrating a decades-long scam disguised as community development. I was just the latest target, but I wasn't going down like the others. Because now, I had proof, and proof changes everything. I hired Amanda Pierce, a former prosecutor turned property attorney, with a reputation for tearing through legal corruption like a buzzsaw. She took one look at the documents and said, "Daniel, this isn't a land dispute, this is a criminal enterprise." And then she asked me something I wasn't ready for. "Are you prepared to take this all the way?" Because taking it all the way meant going up against the most powerful family in the region. The Blackwoods had buried people before in legal fees, in red tape, in fake settlements. But I looked her dead in the eye and said, "They messed with the wrong guy." What I didn't know was that someone inside the Blackwood family was about to flip, and when she did, she wouldn't just help me, she'd help take the entire empire down. Her name was Isabella, and she was about to become the single biggest threat Melinda never saw coming. Do you know what betrayal sounds like? It's not shouting, it's not a gunshot. It's not some dramatic gasp from a soap opera. It's a quiet whisper behind a locked door. A name spoken to softly, a secret said to confidently. And one night, that's exactly what someone inside the Blackwood estate heard, and it cracked their world wide open. That someone was Isabella, Melinda's niece, her own blood, and until that night, she had no idea her aunt had turned their family legacy into a fraud machine, hiding behind HOA bylaws and forged documents. Isabella wasn't just some bystander, she was the Blackwoods' bookkeeper. She handled the accounts, she saw the numbers, the filings, the sudden easement adjustments. But she never questioned them, not until that night. She was working late when Melinda took a speakerphone call in the next room. "The surveyor is getting too close," Melinda said. Her voice was sharp, nervous. "We might need to relocate those original 1970s documents." Then the voice on the other end asked, "What happens if he finds out about the other properties?" Melinda's response, "There are only 3 others. We can handle cleanup if necessary." Cleanup, that single word hit Isabella like a punch to the ribs, not correction, not resolution. Cleanup, she wasn't dumb, she'd heard that word used before in boardrooms and crisis PR meetings, but never when it referred to people, families, neighbors. And certainly not in her own family's voice. That night, Isabella opened the filing cabinet she had never dared to touch before. The one labeled Legacy Operations. Inside was the truth, and it made her sick. For properties, all taken under fake emergencies, all signed by conveniently dead engineers or hidden under phony legal firms with P.O. box addresses, and no state licenses. One of them was mine, and the others. Tom Wilson, a retired mechanic who'd been forced to donate 2 acres to a utility expansion. Maria Santos, a local artist whose lakefront was turned into an environmental buffer zone, only to be converted into a private boat dock. And Bob Taylor, whose driveway was seized for an emergency access road that never got built. 3 lives, 3 lies, and I was number 4. But Isabella didn't just find the evidence. She found the pattern: payments to certain inspectors, recurring transfers to a law firm that didn't exist, financial records that showed a quiet storm of corruption moving beneath the surface of the entire valley. It wasn't just about a cabin anymore. It was about a syndicate that had been hiding behind property law for decades. That's when she made a decision. She called me. I'll never forget her voice. It shook, not with fear, but with guilt. She didn't try to defend herself. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said, "I want to help you." And then, for the first time, I realized I wasn't fighting alone. I had someone on the inside. She handed me the files. Original surveys from the 1970s, unaltered. Bank ledgers, typed memos where Melinda literally used phrases like strategic asset recovery to describe property theft. But the final piece was Tommy, Melinda's brother, the one she used in every excuse. Turns out, he was Isabella's younger brother, and he'd been getting full, proper care from the family trust all along. Melinda's sob story about needing to protect him by seizing land, a manipulation so calculated it could have won an Oscar. That was the moment Isabella snapped. She saw what her aunt truly was. A narcissist with a power complex so dangerous, she would destroy anyone, even family, to maintain control. And that control was slipping. Meanwhile, I was gathering my own forces. I tracked down the other victims: Tom, Maria, Bob. Each of them had the same story: intimidating letters, fake inspectors, offers to settle before legal proceedings could start. Each of them had given up, too scared or too broke to fight. But not anymore. I brought them all to my cabin. We sat around the table where my grandfather once drank coffee and read the paper. And we made a new kind of history. We shared documents, timelines, harassment tactics, names. Every pattern was identical. We weren't victims anymore. We were witnesses. We were a coalition. Amanda, my attorney, explained what this meant. "This isn't a lawsuit," she said. "This is racketeering, conspiracy, document fraud, witness intimidation. You're not suing an HOA. You're exposing a criminal enterprise." So we did what any victims turned warriors would do. We went public. Amanda handed the case to a reporter at Channel 8. Within a week, our story aired under the headline, "HOA Land Grab for Families Fight Back." The effect was nuclear. Residents flooded the town hall. Over 200 people packed the building, shouting, crying, demanding answers. Suddenly, Melinda Blackwood wasn't a leader anymore. She was a criminal. HOA board members started jumping ship. Resignations poured in. Within 48 hours, Pinewood Estates, HOA, the same one that had ruled the valley for 50 years, dissolved, gone, just like that. But Melinda, she wasn't done yet. She still thought she could win. Because monsters like her don't surrender. They slither. That's when Amanda made her masterstroke. She filed a motion in court, Your Honor. The defendant constructed an $850,000 warehouse on my client's land under Nevada law. Any improvements made to land without the owner's permission belong to the rightful owner. The judge barely blinked. He ruled in our favor on the spot. The warehouse? Mine, Melinda's crown jewel, her monument of conquest, now stood as my property. And I knew exactly what to do with it, but Melinda still hadn't reached her lowest point. That came next because monsters, cornered monsters, don't just slither. They attack. 3 weeks after the judge's ruling, my motion cameras caught someone sneaking onto my property at 3 a.m. It was Melinda, dressed in black, trying to break into my cabin. To steal the evidence. I caught her red-handed. With documents in her hand, police arrested her on the spot for burglary, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. The Queen of Pinewood Estates had become an inmate at Washoe County Jail. No bail. No wiggle room. No throne. But the final blow? That came from Isabella. She took everything she had, financials, documents, audio recordings, and laid it all out before the press and prosecutors. Melinda wasn't just going down. She was taking the entire criminal legacy with her. For months later, she stood in court, convicted of document fraud, land theft, assault, breaking and entering, obstruction, and conspiracy. The judge didn't go easy on her. 6 years. In general population, not minimum security, not white-collar country club, real prison. The woman who once ran a neighborhood with fear and forged papers now had to share a bunk with people who didn't care what car she drove. But you want to know what poetic justice tastes like? I took that warehouse she built and I turned it into my headquarters, 2-bedroom guest suite, surveying office, wildflower meadow, and I painted it bright turquoise with yellow trim, colors she once banned in the HOA rulebook. Turns out, poetic justice comes in color. And profit. And guest bookings at $350 a night. I even named the business Blackwood's Downfall, Justice Prevails Retreat, and people loved it. But this story isn't done yet, because when Melinda finally made bail 6 months later, she didn't disappear. She called me. She said she wanted to meet. Against Amanda's advice, I agreed. In a public place, cameras watching, people nearby. We met behind the courthouse. She looked like a shadow of herself, tired, hollow, desperate. I told her I had everything. The documents, the testimonies, the recordings, the media. She was finished, but she didn't break. She doubled down. You think you can destroy me? She snapped. My family owns this town. I gave her one final chance to do the right thing. Return the land. Compensate the victims. Apologize. Her response, never. And then she snapped. She reached into her bag, pulled out a heavy paperweight, and swung it at my laptop. The laptop with all the evidence. When I blocked it, she swung again. This time at my head. I pushed her back to protect myself. She stumbled, fell, hit her head on the side of her car. And for a moment, I thought she might die. I called 911. Held her bleeding head in my hands, because even after everything she'd done, I wasn't going to let her die. But the cameras caught it all. And when the footage played in court of her assault, her rage, her weapon, the judge didn't hesitate. Attempted assault with a deadly weapon. 6 more years. Melinda Blackwood, the face of Pinewood Estates, was now just another inmate number in a system she once believed she controlled. And me, I stood free, victorious, and more determined than ever to make sure no one else would suffer the way we did. Because what started as property harassment turned into a revolution, and it was only just beginning. Do you know what it feels like to win a war and still not feel safe? Melinda Blackwood was in jail, her face plastered across news stations as the woman who turned a neighborhood into a criminal empire. But even with her gone, the shadow of what she built still stretched across this valley like a scar that hadn't finished healing. Because what Melinda had created wasn't just a scheme. It was a system. And systems take time to burn down. The HOA may have collapsed overnight, but its effects did in single quotes. The fear, that stayed. The harassment, it kept coming. Only now, it was more subtle, more desperate, and directed not just at me but at the others too. Tom Wilson's auto shop was hit with surprise inspections, fire code violations that didn't exist the week before. Maria Santos had her art studio permits delayed by a zoning board that couldn't even explain its own rulings. Bob Taylor started receiving anonymous tips to the IRS about undeclared income. And me, HOA-style notices kept reappearing on my door. From an organization that no longer legally existed, notices that cited fake regulations, warnings about community disruption, letters that threatened fines from a dissolved authority. Someone was still trying to keep the illusion alive. But here's the thing about illusions. Once they break, you can never quite see them the same way again. That's when we started fighting. Back not just for ourselves, but for every person who had ever been pushed around by a fake law firm and invented ordinance. Or a paper bully with a letterhead. We weren't victims anymore, we were builders. And we were about to build something better than Melinda's empire ever could be. It started with a block party, that's right, a simple idea born in frustration, raised on spite, and perfected in sweet, ironic celebration. We called it Victory Day. We held it in the shadow of the warehouse Melinda built to dominate my land. Now it was mine. Now it was a monument. We invited everyone, all the former victims, all the neighbors who had silently endured years of intimidation, everyone who had ever bitten their tongue because they didn't know their rights, or didn't think they had the strength to fight back. Tom grilled burgers, Maria hosted a lakeside art show. Bob gave a speech that ended with tears, real ones, as he looked out at the faces of people who finally believed him. And Tommy? Tommy brought his drawings, colorful, emotional, wild, like his soul had been unlocked. One canvas in particular stopped me cold. It was an abstract piece, birds, dozens of them, bursting from a steel cage. He called it freedom, and somehow, without words, that one piece captured everything we'd been through. Everyone applauded. But when I looked over, I saw Isabella crying. Not quiet tears. Shoulder shaking, breath catching grief, and I knew why. Because this wasn't just her freedom. It was Tommy's, and all her life. She'd been told he was fragile, that he needed to be controlled, protected, but the truth? Tommy wasn't fragile. He was thriving now that he was free from Melinda's grip. And Isabella, she was finally becoming who she was always meant to be. Later that night, she pulled me aside, her hands trembled as she lit a candle on the lakeshore. I spent so many years defending her, she whispered. I told myself she meant well, that she just wanted to preserve the family legacy, but she didn't. She just wanted to own everything, everyone, even him. I didn't say anything. Some truths don't need answers. They just need space. But what Isabella said next, it stuck with me. She built a kingdom of fear. And now we're building a community of freedom on top of the rubble she left behind. She was right, because as Victory Day turned into Victory Weekend, people didn't just eat and drink and dance, they organized. We created a voluntary neighborhood group, no fees, no board, no enforcement powers. Just neighbors helping neighbors, and something incredible happened. Property values went up by 20%. Turns out when people are allowed to plant wildflowers, hang laundry, paint their homes bright colors, and live without fear of being fined for parking in their own driveway, they thrive. And you know what else? They spend more, they stay longer. They care deeper. Freedom is good for business. And speaking of business, remember that warehouse? I didn't just turn it into a guest house and surveying office. I branded it Blackwood's Downfall, Justice Prevails Retreat. I gave guided tours of the property, sold merchandise that read, don't mess with landowners, even offered a Tyranny to Triumph package, 3 nights, hot tub access, and the full revenge story told in person. People came from 5 states, some just to hear me tell it. Some to cry, some to share stories of their own HOA nightmares, stories that had never made it past kitchen tables and late night whispers, but now they had hope. Because if I could win, maybe they could too. My business exploded. Cross-land solutions, property dispute services. We went from 1 office to 3 in under a year. Amanda and I began consulting on state legislation to restrict HOA overreach, and Isabella? She launched Honest Property Solutions, an education group that taught families how to read deeds, challenge illegal easements, and protect their land. Within 12 months, our little coalition had become something much bigger. A movement. We didn't just beat Melinda, we buried her entire empire in wildflowers and good business. But here's where the story gets darker, because even in prison, Melinda didn't stop. She refused every rehabilitation program, filed appeals no court would touch, wrote letters to newspapers accusing me of orchestrating a landowner coup. She told reporters that she was the victim, that her family had been stolen from, and then she wrote to Tommy. Not once, but 23 times. He never answered. Not because Isabella told him not to, but because he didn't want to. He'd stopped asking about her, stopped mentioning her name. Because somewhere deep inside, even he knew she wasn't coming back. Not the aunt. Not the caregiver. Not the woman she used to be before the power took over. And when I visited her 2 years into her sentence, she still hadn't changed, still bitter, still blaming everyone else. I remember sitting across the security glass, looking into her cold, angry eyes and thinking this woman was never going to say sorry. So I said it for her. I forgive you, I told her. But your actions had consequences. Her jaw clenched. I'll never forgive you for destroying my family, she hissed, and I smiled. Your family, I said quietly, is finally safe from you. I never visited her again, but I didn't need to. Because every time I walked out onto my porch, and looked at that warehouse now glowing with laughter and light and wildflowers. Every time Tommy smiled during his art shows, every time a former victim raised a glass and said, "I finally feel free," I knew we hadn't just survived her, we had replaced her with something stronger, braver, kinder, and just when I thought the story was finally winding down, we received a call that changed everything from Washington. Turns out, someone had been watching and they had a proposition. It started as a voicemail, short, clipped, almost too formal. "Mr. Cross, this is Representative Dana Rios with the Nevada State Assembly. I'd like to speak with you about your situation in Pinewood Estates. Please return my call at your earliest convenience." I played it twice just to make sure it was real. Because when a state lawmaker calls you, a land surveyor with a messy voice and an $850,000 warehouse turned rental, you know something big is coming, but I didn't expect this. When I called back, I got her chief of staff. Young guy, eager, overprepared. "Sir, the representative has been tracking increasing complaints related to HOA letters across the state. Your story has reached her desk. She believes it represents something much larger than one neighborhood." I agreed to meet, not in some courthouse or legislative office, but at Blackwood's downfall. Because if they wanted to see what the fight was really about, they needed to see the battlefield. She showed up in a gray SUV, no press, no entourage, just her and a legal pad, and when I walked her through everything, the warehouse, the wildflowers, the guestbook entries from people whose lives had been ruined by fake HOA letters and corrupt boards, I saw something shift behind her eyes. "This isn't just property theft," she said. "This is systemic abuse, and it's been hiding in plain sight." Then she asked a question that would change my life. "Mr. Cross, would you be willing to testify?" Now look, I'm not a courtroom kind of guy. I wear boots, not suits. I know how to read topography lines, not teleprompters. But something in her tone told me this was bigger than me. So I said yes, and suddenly, I wasn't just the guy who'd beaten an HOA criminal syndicate. I was the face of a statewide movement. In the weeks that followed, I helped draft what would become the Landowner Protection and HOA Accountability Act. It outlined new restrictions on HOA powers, banning secret emergency ordinances, requiring full transparency in property modifications, enforcing third-party audits of board members, and criminal penalties for fraudulent filings. And the best part? It had teeth. Real ones. The kind that bite down on paper tyrants who think they can scare people into silence. When the bill reached the committee hearings, I was asked to speak. Amanda sat beside me, Isabella behind me, and all around me were the faces of people who had once been victims, now warriors in suits and ties, holding folders of their own evidence. I looked up at the panel, 12 lawmakers, all watching, all listening, and I told them the truth about how Melinda Blackwood tried to bury me with a warehouse. How she forged the name of a dead man, how she manipulated her family, how she turned disability into an excuse and ego into a weapon, and how even after everything we forgave her, but not her crimes, because you can forgive a person, but justice? That has to be served cold. And then I said something I hadn't even rehearsed. Land ownership in America is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to be sacred. But when HOA boards become private governments, when they can issue fines, seize land, and fabricate emergencies without oversight, that's not community. That's tyranny in disguise. I didn't realize I'd said it loud until the room went quiet. Pin drop quiet. And then applause. Not polite, not political. Real. The kind that starts slow, then builds, the kind that says, "We've been waiting for someone to say this." The bill passed the committee unanimously, but it didn't stop there. Media outlets picked it up. Headlines like, "From Cabin to Capitol, How One Man Turned HOA Injustice into Reform, Melinda Blackwood's Victim Now Shaping State Law. Surveyor Who Exposed HOA Fraud Helps Write the Rules." Within 2 months, the bill passed the full assembly. And then the Senate governor signed it on a Wednesday morning, with 7 of us behind him, myself, Amanda, Isabella, Tom, Maria, Bob, and Tommy holding his painting of birds escaping the cage. I'll never forget the governor's words. "To those who think a fake law printed on HOA letterhead gives you the right to steal someone's home, Nevada just told you otherwise." And just like that, everything changed statewide. But while the media celebrated and the law took effect, something darker was stirring beneath it all, because Melinda wasn't done. She may have been locked away, but she still had contacts, allies. And now that her empire was publicly burned to the ground, those allies were feeling exposed. You see, Melinda didn't act alone. She never had, and as new audits rolled out statewide, triggered by the new legislation, dozens of other communities started surfacing with near-identical patterns, forged reports, fake engineering claims, bogus easements, HOA accounts being used like personal piggy banks, and in nearly all of them, The same legal firm name kept showing up, one we already knew was fake. Which meant one thing, Melinda's playbook had been shared, replicated, sold. And I wasn't just the face of victory anymore, I was the guy standing in the middle of the fire. Again, I started getting calls, emails, letters, even strangers showing up at the warehouse. Crying, holding folders, asking for help, people who'd lost their homes, their land, their savings. And just like that, my guest house business, it turned into a full-blown war room. Amanda and I worked double time. Creating packets for each new case, Isabella hired staff, Tom helped with property scans. Maria volunteered for admin work, even Bob handled field inspections. We weren't just running a business anymore, we were running a resistance. And every week, more came forward, each story more outrageous than the last. An elderly woman fined for $0 for growing tomatoes in her backyard, a single mother forced to paint her house 3 times in 1 year because it was too cheerful. A war veteran told to remove his flagpole because it was unauthorized structure. And in each of those stories, I heard my own, different names. Same playbook. Same abuse. Same silence. And I knew Melinda's sentence might have ended her chapter, but the book wasn't finished yet. And then came the message that chilled me more than anything I'd heard since this whole war began. A letter. No return address. Type. Short. You're making dangerous people nervous. Walk away, cross, or we'll finish what Melinda started. No signature. No threat of legal action. Just a warning, a promise, and maybe a reminder that there's always someone waiting in the wings. Because power doesn't die easy. It reinvents itself, but this time, I wasn't the only one standing. I had allies, I had laws, I had people watching, and I had proof. So I pinned that letter to the wall of my office. Right above the headline that started it all, HOA built a warehouse on my land, now I own it, and Karen's in jail. And every time I saw it, I remembered exactly what I was fighting for, because this isn't just about land, or laws, or one warehouse. This is about something so many people never think they'll lose until it's taken from them. Dignity. Freedom. Home. And I swear, no matter how many come at me, no matter how deep the corruption runs, I will never stop defending that. Not while I've got breath in my lungs and boots on the ground. Because when you've been dragged through fire, you don't just walk away, you walk back in and pull everyone else out. Have you ever stood at the edge of something so big it scared you to win? That's where I found myself. The law had changed, Melinda was in prison, the warehouse was mine. The movement was growing, but somewhere in the quiet, I felt it, that familiar chill in the spine, like something was watching. Waiting. Because the bigger your victory, the more enemies you can't see. And one of mine had just come out of hiding. It started with a knock at my door, a man in a tailored suit, clean cut, professional smile. The kind of guy who sells you a mortgage and signs your death warrant in the same handshake. Mr. Cross, he said. Names. Raymond Denton. I represent Central Equity Partners. We're looking to invest in rural real estate opportunities. And your property caught our attention. He didn't blink once while he said it, didn't glance at the lake, didn't admire the wildflowers, didn't even react to the turquoise paint job on the warehouse, which meant one thing. He wasn't here to invest, he was here to take. Different suit. Same game. You've got quite the story, he continued. High engagement, strong emotional arc. You've even become a bit of a symbol. He stepped closer, but symbols can be purchased, rebranded, cleaned up for wider audiences. I looked him square in the face. You're trying to buy my story? No, he said, smiling wider. I'm trying to buy your silence. He offered me a number. I won't tell you how high it was, because honestly, it doesn't matter. There's no dollar amount that replaces integrity, not once you've bled for it. When I turned him down, his tone changed. That's disappointing, he said. You've inspired a lot of noise, the kind of noise that makes investors nervous. We're prepared to offer you a generous exit strategy before that noise becomes a liability. Then he leaned in. You don't want to fight. What's next, Mr. Cross? I didn't reply. I just stepped back inside and closed the door, and the second the lock clicked, I knew it. This wasn't over, because behind every Melinda Blackwood, there's someone wealthier, colder, and far more dangerous. Melinda was a tyrant driven by ego, but this was corporate. Calculated. National. They weren't trying to control one neighborhood. They were buying hundreds. HOA letters were just the delivery system, power wrapped in bylaws. Control hidden inside covenants. And now that I'd exposed the trick, they wanted the magician gone. That night, I called Amanda, told her everything. She wasn't surprised. These people don't see you, she said. They surround you. They flood your name with fake scandals. They dig through your past, your taxes, your business partners. They turn public support into public suspicion. And sure enough, the very next week, it started. Anonymous online posts accusing me of forging my own documents for fame. Whispers that I manipulated Isabella for insider access, emails to local news outlets questioning if I'd exploited Tommy's disability to sell a sob story. And the worst part? A zoning complaint filed against my warehouse. By a newly formed HOA. An HOA that didn't exist last month. They were trying to reboot the system, rename it, reshape it, and use my playbook against me. I was furious, but fury doesn't win wars. Precision does. So I did what I always do. I started documenting. Again. Only this time I didn't just capture the facts, I captured the people. I filmed interviews with Tom, Maria, Bob, with Isabella and Tommy, with Jana, the whistleblower clerk. Real stories, real trauma, real victories, and then I published them. Online. Free. No ads, no subscriptions. Just raw, unfiltered truth, and it spread like wildfire. People from Florida, Texas, Arizona, and even Canada began messaging us. They'd been targeted to land seized, permits denied, laws used like weapons, but now they weren't alone because we gave them a name. Land Shield Network, a coalition of homeowners, attorneys, surveyors, and survivors fighting back together. Amanda helped launch the nonprofit. Isabella handled operations, and I became its face, not by choice, but by necessity, because sometimes leadership isn't about being the loudest. It's about being the last one standing when the smoke clears. But while we were growing hope, our enemies grew bold. Late one night, I heard gravel shift outside. Camera feed flickered, motion alert buzzed, and I saw them, 3 men in dark clothes, spray painting the front of the warehouse. One word, written in red across the entry: traitor. But here's the thing about traitors, they betray something false to protect something true, and I do it again. Because if loyalty means letting your neighbors suffer in silence, then I'm proud to be disloyal. The police report led nowhere, just like the zoning complaint. Just like the fake HOA, they were testing me. Waiting to see if I'd break. And for a moment, I almost did. One afternoon, I found Tommy sitting by the lake. He had a new sketch pad, but he wasn't drawing birds, he was drawing a storm. Dark, jagged lines. People caught in wind. Houses blowing away. I sat next to him, unsure of what to say. Until he looked up and said, "Will they take this too?" I shook my head. "No, buddy, not this time." But even as I said it, I wondered if I was lying, because you can win one battle, you can even win a few, but against a machine, you need more than proof, you need people. And that's when I knew what had to come next. We had to go national. Not just stories, legislation, protection. Education. We started holding town halls, first in Nevada. Then Arizona. Then Colorado. Crowds tripled every month. Former victims, local officials, reporters, law students, veterans, people who'd spent years being told to read the bylaws or call a lawyer. People who finally had a voice. At one event, a woman came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I lost my father's land to a fraudulent HOA in 2010, she whispered. "I didn't fight, I thought we were alone. But now, I see we weren't." I looked around that room, packed shoulder to shoulder with strangers united by the same pain, and I realized something. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours, but the higher we rose, the more the storm gathered. Raymond Denton returned, this time with an offer disguised as a warning. "We're not trying to silence you, Daniel," he said. "We're trying to contain the narrative. Keep the market stable. We'll fund your nonprofit, nationalize your message, as long as you stop naming names. Stop naming names. In other words, neuter the truth." I told him where to shove it, and as he left, he smiled one last time. "This movement has a shelf life," he said. "Don't let it expire with you." But here's what he didn't understand. You can't kill a movement built on truth, because even if I fall, we don't. Even if they silence me, we speak louder. Even if they buy the system, we build a better one. That night, I stood alone in the wildflower field where Melinda's empire used to loom. And I made a vow. Not just to fight, but to outlast, because the war isn't over. The enemy just changed its face. But I've seen behind the curtain now, and I will never stop pulling it back. Not for money, not for peace. Not even for safety. Because some truths are too heavy to carry quietly, and this one, I'll carry it all the way to the end. There's a moment when a local fight becomes national news. You don't feel it coming. You just wake up one day, check your phone, and there it is. CNN notification, grassroots landowner movement sweeps west. The man behind Land Shield speaks out. They called me the surveyor who stared down the system. My inbox exploded. Reporters, lawmakers, podcast invites, even a documentary crew from Oregon. And with every new article, every interview, the message spread further. You are not alone. You can fight back, you can win, but with attention comes scrutiny and danger. It was only a matter of time before the machine struck back, this time through the courts. A federal lawsuit filed by a shell organization backed by Central Equity Partners. They claimed I was inciting property disputes across state lines, that my organization was responsible for inciting civil interference with legitimate HOA operations. It was absurd, fabricated from thin air, papered in legalese. But it didn't have to be real. It just had to be loud, and it worked. Donors paused. Reporters hesitated. Even some of our supporters got nervous. That's what lawsuits like this are for, not to win. To slow you down. To drain your time, your money, your spirit, and it nearly worked. Until the most unlikely person showed up at my door. Jonna, the former county clerk who'd risked everything to help me take down Melinda Blackwood. She looked tired, older, but her eyes were blazing with something I hadn't seen since that night she handed me the key to the entire case. Daniel, she said, you're going to want to see this. She handed me a hard drive, and on it was everything: emails, contracts, communications between Central Equity Partners, and over 40 HOA letters across 5 states. They'd been funding HOA takeovers, installing board members, purchasing land through legal loopholes, then flipping it through shell companies, all while creating artificial ordinances to force residents to sell under pressure. This wasn't just corruption, this was federal racketeering. Where did this come from? I asked. And that's when she said the name I never expected to hear again: Melinda. I felt my stomach twist. She reached out to me from prison, Jonna explained. Said she wanted to talk, said she had something bigger than all of us. At first, I thought it was a trap, another manipulation, but when I saw the data, when I watched the call recordings Melinda had made secretly from inside the prison, something changed. She wasn't doing this for revenge. She was doing it for redemption. In one call, she said it plainly: I was a pawn, a queen on the board maybe, but still a pawn. I thought I was protecting legacy. I was just the first brick in a wall they built around everyone. She wasn't innocent. Not by a long shot, but she'd finally seen the structure she helped build, and she wanted it to fall. We turned the drive over to Amanda. She nearly dropped it when she saw the list of cooperating HOA letters. I've never seen this level of coordinated property manipulation, she whispered. This is organized crime. We didn't go to the local news, we went straight to the FBI. 2 weeks later, a federal task force was formed. Operation Ground Truth, and the targets weren't just HOAs. They were lawyers. Developers. County officials. Engineers. For hire. And yes, Central Equity Partners. But just as the investigation began, we got hit harder than ever. Our server was hacked. All donor data wiped, threats emailed to our entire legal team. My personal bank account frozen under suspicion of illicit organizational activity. It was war now, no more paper bullets. They were coming for everything. And in the chaos, Isabella disappeared. One morning, she just didn't show up. No calls, no messages. Her phone turned off. We tried hospitals. Police. Friends. Nothing. For 3 days, I thought the worst. Until a note appeared under the door at Blackwood's. Downfall, folded in half. No envelope. No signature. I'm safe, but I had to go dark. They know who I am now. Don't try to find me. Just finish what we started. The handwriting was hers, but something in the phrasing felt off. Amanda agreed. Either she's in hiding or someone made her disappear. And just like that, my movement's heart was gone, but we didn't stop, couldn't stop. Because in her absence came someone new. Tommy. 18 now, still soft-spoken, still expressive in his art more than words, but what he did next shook me to the core. At the next Land Shield rally, Tommy walked on stage, and without saying a word, held up a new painting. It was a landscape, a neighborhood at night, streetlights, glowing. Windows lit. But overhead, a hand, not clenched in a fist, not pointing. Just open, and beneath it, in his own lettering, protect each other. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood. Silent. Moved. Because that boy, the one Melinda had used as a shield for her crimes, had become our movement's new compass. He'd lost his sister's guidance, his childhood safety, his trust in family, but he still believed in us. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer about me. I was just the match. These people, they were the flame. Weeks later, the FBI executed coordinated warrants in 3 states. HOA board members were arrested, county surveyors indicted, attorneys disbarred. And for the first time in U.S. history, a federal investigation listed HOA criminal racketeering as its core charge. We had done it. We'd ripped the curtain all the way down. But with the truth out, came one final twist, one I wasn't ready for. Melinda Blackwood was being considered for early release. Her cooperation had led to dozens of arrests. Her prison behavior had improved. Her health, according to her attorney, was in decline. When the letter arrived confirming her parole hearing, I stared at it for 10 straight minutes. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was unsure. Because what do you do when the villain who started it all wants a second chance? Do you stop her, forgive her, or simply let her face her own silence? Amanda looked at me as I set the letter down. It's your call, Daniel, but for the first time in years, I didn't know what to say because redemption is a strange thing. Sometimes it feels like justice, sometimes it feels like betrayal, and sometimes it just feels unfinished. You'd think after everything we'd been through, the courtroom wouldn't scare me anymore. But that morning, the day of Melinda Blackwood's parole hearing, I couldn't stop shaking. Not with fear, but with something deeper, something colder, something that felt like betrayal wrapped in uncertainty. Because no matter how many laws we'd passed, no matter how many corrupt boards we'd exposed, the woman who started it all might walk free. Early. And the worst part, I didn't know if she should. Amanda and I sat outside the courtroom in silence. She was calm, at least on the outside. But I could see the tension in her hands as she folded the same document 3 times over. It was the release packet, prepared by the Department of Corrections. If granted, Melinda would serve the remainder of her sentence under strict house arrest and community supervision. It sounded harmless on paper. But nothing about Melinda Blackwood was harmless. I need to be in there, I finally said. Amanda looked up. You sure? I nodded. I don't know what I'm going to say, but I know I have to say something. The courtroom was small, no cameras, no press, just 5 board members, 2 attorneys, and a woman I hadn't seen face to face in over 2 years. Melinda. She looked different. Older. Thinner. Hair grown out and gray at the roots. Hands slightly trembling as she sat, wrists cuffed, ankles chained, but her eyes still sharp. Still watching everything. Her attorney stood first, rattling off her good behavior, her cooperation in the federal investigation, her declining health, her emotional transformation. He said the words like he believed them, maybe he did. But when he finished, all eyes turned to me. Mr. Cross, the chairwoman said, we understand you are the primary victim in Ms. Blackwood's case. Would you like to make a statement? I stood slowly, cleared my throat, and said something I didn't expect to say. I believe in consequences, I began, and I believe in justice, but I also believe in something else. Melinda looked up, eyebrows raised slightly. I believe in change. A long pause, then I continued. Because if people can't change, then what's the point of any of this? What's the point of law? Of prison? Of redemption? The board members leaned forward. Melinda Blackwood hurt me, I said. She tried to steal my home. She used her own family as pawns. She committed crimes that damaged more than just land. She fractured lives. I looked at her directly, and for a long time, I wanted her to suffer. The silence in the room thickened, but then she did something I didn't expect. She helped bring down something bigger than herself. She gave us the map to the real enemy, and because of that, dozens of families now have their homes back. Dozens of criminals are behind bars. Melinda blinked slowly. For the first time, no defiance in her expression. Just a hollow, cautious silence. I'm not here to beg for her release, I said. I'm here to say, if she has changed, if this transformation is real, then she should prove it. Not with words, not with lawyers, but with service, with restitution, with the kind of commitment it takes to undo a legacy of damage. I took a breath. I don't know if she's ready for that, but I do know the world's watching and will be watching. I sat down. And for a long time, the room said nothing. Then the chairwoman asked Melinda if she had anything to say, and what she said, no one could have predicted. She stood, chained clinking, hands trembling, and spoke in a voice I barely recognized. I built a prison long before the state put me in one. She said, I built it with fear, with arrogance, with control disguised as protection, and when that stopped working, I built it with lies. No one moved. She looked at me directly. My family doesn't speak my name anymore, she said, and I don't blame them. Then she reached into her folder and pulled out a letter, one she'd written herself, my confession. She said, everything I did, everyone I bribed, everything I signed, every family I hurt. The board asked if the document had been submitted to the federal investigation. She nodded. It's already with the task force. But I wanted Daniel to see it first, because he gave me the chance to be more than what I was. I didn't know how to feel, anger, forgiveness, gratitude, but then she added something else. I don't expect freedom, she said. I expect work. If you release me, I will spend every day helping rebuild what I tried to destroy. I'll answer questions, testify, volunteer, dig holes, sweep sidewalks. I don't care. Just give me the chance to contribute, not control. The board recessed for deliberation, and I sat in that room feeling like I'd been dropped into a world I didn't recognize. Melinda Blackwood asking to serve. Not rule. Not own, just serve. 30 minutes later, the decision came: conditional release, strict monitoring, no internet access. All earnings to be redirected toward restitution. And most surprisingly, one additional condition added by the board chairwoman herself, Ms. Blackwood will report weekly to Land Shield Network. All hours served under their community justice initiative. My jaw dropped. Amanda squeezed my arm. Melinda nodded. I accept. That night, I stood outside the warehouse, the very one she tried to claim as her monument of control, and I watched as she stepped onto the gravel driveway. No longer a queen, no longer a tyrant, no longer a monster. Just a woman with scars. And a choice. Isabella returned 3 days later. She'd been in hiding, tipped off by a former associate that her life might be in danger if she testified again. But now, she was back, and furious. You gave her what? She said, slamming the news file on my desk. Not freedom, I said. An obligation, she paced, fuming, conflicted. And then her voice broke. She ruined so many lives. Daniel, she manipulated me, used Tommy, lied about my parents. I wanted her gone, forever, I know. She deserves worse, I. No, then why? Because she's the one who gave us them. I pointed to the wall behind me. Photos of every board member arrested, every lawyer indicted, every restitution check delivered. She handed us the last key. I didn't do it for her, Isabella. I did it for us. To end this, she stared at the photos, then sat down slowly. She's still dangerous, she whispered. Yes, but now she's dangerous to them, not us. And finally, she nodded. Tommy entered the room holding a new painting, a simple image, a bridge. Two people standing on either end. One crossing, one waiting. And in the corner, in his handwriting, only meet halfway if you're both walking. We hung it in the office that night, and the next morning, Melinda showed up at 9 o'clock sharp. Ready to mop floors, answer phones, and read every hate letter our office had ever received without flinching. Redemption doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in tiny, humiliating acts, done quietly, repeated, daily, watched closely. And Melinda Blackwood had just taken her first step. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with flashing lights and courtroom applause. Sometimes it comes quietly, on a Tuesday morning. When a man walks into his own home, once threatened, almost taken, and hears children laughing in the backyard. That's how I knew it was over, not because the lawsuit stopped, not because the headlines faded, but because peace returned that morning. I stepped outside with my coffee and looked over the land they tried to erase. The warehouse, now turquoise, now whole, buzzed with movement. Staff inside answering calls from people we'd never met, whose lives we were still helping restore. The wildflower field, the same one Melinda had tried to pave into submission, was now part of a protected wildlife easement named after Tommy's sister. The Sophia Preserve. Visitors came year-round. To sit, to reflect, to remember what courage looks like. Melinda kept showing up. Every Tuesday and Thursday. Not because she wanted to, because she had to, but over time something shifted in her. She stopped hiding behind duty, started showing signs of something that almost resembled humility. She read every complaint letter, cleaned every muddy boot print from the entry floors, filed documents from people she'd once threatened. Some staff refused to speak to her. Others watched her from a distance, unsure. But Tommy, he brought her tea every week. Never said a word, just set it beside her desk and walked away. When I asked him why, he shrugged and said, everyone has to start somewhere. He was right. We all started somewhere. I started as a surveyor with a quiet dream and a broken past. Amanda started as a lawyer with a voice nobody wanted to hear. Isabella began as a granddaughter desperate to prove that her family name didn't define her worth. And Melinda? She started as the villain, but even villains sometimes turn back, not because they're forgiven, but because they're watched. Held accountable, and given a path forward steep enough to remind them every single day who they used to be. The movement kept growing. Land Shield opened new offices in 5 states. We trained attorneys, surveyors, volunteer mediators. We didn't just fight back. We replaced the system that failed us. People no longer whispered about HOA abuse. They spoke out loud, on record, on the steps of state houses, and on the floors of town halls. Legislation was introduced in 3 more states. To pass, 1 failed, but narrowly. And the day that vote failed, something incredible happened. Hundreds of homeowners, most who'd never met each other, organized, marched, and voted out the city council who'd blocked it. They sent us photos. Smiling. Holding signs that said, property does not equal power. Not your land to steal. HOA letters serve us, not themselves. That's when I realized this wasn't my story anymore. It was theirs. The boy in Oklahoma who stopped a fake lien with a TikTok video, and a copy of our HOA fraud packet. The grandmother in Florida who won her land back after 12 years in court and brought cupcakes to every neighbor who testified. The veteran in Montana who rewrote his own HOA's bylaws and made the board himself. Change didn't come all at once. It came in waves. Slow. Steady. Relentless. Just like the abuse had come, only now We were the ones building the system, and there was one more thing left to do. It was Amanda's idea. She'd been designing it quietly for months. She came into the office holding a folded paper and a soft smile. "I think it's time," she said. On the paper was a design, a monument, a public one, not marble, not bronze. Wood and stone. Built by volunteers. At the base, a simple plaque in memory of all those who lost their land. In honor of those who stood to reclaim it. May no one ever fight alone again. It wasn't about ego or legacy. It was about remembrance. We built it right next to the wildflower field. Over 300 people came to the opening ceremony. Isabella gave a short speech, Tommy unveiled the plaque, and I stood off to the side, watching quietly, because my fight was over, not done, not perfect. But over. Others would take it from here, people younger, smarter, fiercer, and maybe even softer. I still walk that property every morning. Still inspect the ground like I'm reading a story only I can understand. Still drink my coffee on the same porch they once tried to fence off, but now I walk without fear, without doubt, without anger, because everything they tried to take, they ended up handing back, multiplied. My voice. My land. My dignity. Melinda moved away a year after completing her restitution period. She never asked for forgiveness. Never pretended it didn't happen. She just shook my hand one final time and said, "You were right about one thing. Power doesn't die easy, but truth, that lives longer." I nodded. Did in single quotes to say a word, didn't need to. Some endings don't need applause, they just need silence, peace, and a door that finally closes gently. 3 years later, a reporter came to do a follow-up story. They asked me what I'd say to the people still fighting, still trapped in the same system we'd clawed our way out of. I thought about it for a long moment, then said, "They'll try to scare you, wear you down, make you feel alone. That's the first move every system like this makes, isolation. But don't fall for it. Find your people, your evidence, your truth. Because truth backed by community, that's not just powerful, that's unbreakable." They asked if I had any regrets. I almost laughed. Regrets, sure. I regret not fighting sooner. I regret trusting people who didn't earn it. But I don't regret the fire, because without it, I wouldn't have known what I was made of, and I wouldn't have met the people who pulled me through. People like Amanda. Tommy. Isabella. Even Melinda, in her own twisted way, forced me to become what I never thought I could, a defender of the land, a guardian of truth, a builder of something bigger than me. And in the end, that's what they couldn't steal. Not with warehouses. Not with bylaws, not even with fear. Because you can take a man's land, you can try to take his home. But when you try to take his name and he stands tall anyway, then you didn't defeat him, you forged him. And that's what they did. They didn't bury me. They buried the last lie they thought I'd believe. And what rose from that wasn't a man. It was a movement. So if you're hearing this now and you're fighting your own version of Melinda, don't back down. You're not alone. You're not powerless. You're not crazy. You are a wall of truth they can't climb, a storm they can't stop. And somewhere out there, your land is waiting. To be reclaimed. To be rebuilt. To be yours. Again. Forever.